If you thought Salem was going to let anyone have a quiet Monday, think again. Because the February 23rd episode of Days of Our Lives is setting up 3 explosive storylines at once. A brand new marriage that comes with instant danger, a hospital shocker that could change everything Kayla Johnson thinks she knows, and a good deed from Johnny DiMera that may turn into a legal nightmare. And here's the scary part. These plots aren't separate. They're starting to weave together, and by the end of the episode, someone's safety, freedom, and future could all be on the line. Let's break it down. We kick off Monday with Alex Kyriakis doing something that feels almost too hopeful for Salem. He brings Justin Kyriakis the kind of news any father would want to hear. Lex and Stephanie didn't just work things out. They went all in. They eloped. They got married. And Justin's reaction is exactly what you'd expect: pride, relief, even that subtle sense of, finally, something good in this family. Because in Justin's mind, marriage means stability. It means commitment. It means the chaos might calm down. But here's the problem. In Days of Our Lives, stability is usually a lie, or a trap. Because this marriage isn't just a romantic milestone. It's a headline. It's a public declaration. And most importantly, it's an emotional pressure point that someone else can exploit. Think about the psychology behind an elopement. It's impulsive. It's intense. It's rooted in urgency. It's basically the couple saying, "We're choosing each other now. No more waiting. No more fear." That sounds empowering. Until you remember there's already a stalker orbiting them. A stalker doesn't just want attention. A stalker wants control. So what happens when Alex and Stephanie do the one thing that signals they're no longer controllable? They make it official. They become harder to separate. They stop acting like two individuals and start acting like a united front. And that can absolutely be the moment that flips the stalker from watching to acting. Because now, in the stalker's mind, the narrative changes. If the threats didn't stop them, then the threats weren't strong enough. If love made them bolder, then the stalker has to get more extreme. If they're protected by family and marriage, then the stalker has to strike where protection doesn't matter. That's why Justin's congratulations, as warm as it is, feels tragically ironic. While he's celebrating what he thinks is a new beginning, the danger isn't fading. It's tightening. And the scariest part? The elopement could be exactly the information the stalker was waiting for. A clear signal that it's time to move from intimidation to abduction. So yes, this marriage is romantic. But in Salem, romance often functions like a target painted in bright red. Over on the investigation side, Steve Johnson and Jada Hunter are doing everything right, on paper. They're not ignoring the threat. They're not brushing it off. They're treating this like a real case, because it is. They compare timelines. They review evidence. They try to connect the dots around the stalker's behavior. The threats, the pattern, the escalation. And Steve, especially, is the kind of investigator who doesn't just look for what happened. He looks for why it happened. Because motive is always the key in Salem. But here's what makes this storyline so tense, and honestly, so frustrating in the best soap opera way. Steve and Jada are solving a puzzle, while the villain is already playing the next move. That's the classic thriller setup. The good guys are in analysis mode, but the stalker is in execution mode. And the spoilers make it painfully clear that Steve and Jada believe they're closing in. They probably feel like the case is finally narrowing. They might even have a suspect list. They might even think, okay, we can protect Stephanie now. But the twist is this. Protection only works if you're protecting the right place at the right time. Because Stephanie isn't threatened in some obvious setting like her home with a broken window or a shadow outside the door. She's threatened somewhere nobody wants to imagine danger happening: the hospital. A controlled environment, a trusted environment, A place filled with staff, badges, schedules, routine. And that's what makes this stalker smarter than the average menace. Instead of attacking with noise and chaos, they attack with access. They exploit systems. They exploit trust. They exploit the assumption that this is safe. So while Steve and Jada are putting their heads together, thinking like detectives, the stalker is thinking like an infiltrator. And that creates a terrifying gap. Steve and Jada are searching for evidence. The stalker is creating evidence. Steve and Jada are trying to predict the next move. The stalker is already walking into the building to make it happen. So even if Steve and Jada are right about who's behind this, it might not matter. Because being right doesn't stop an abduction. Timing stops an abduction. Presence stops an abduction. And based on what happens next, with the stalker striking again, Steve and Jada aren't just behind. They're seconds behind. And in a story like this, seconds are the difference between a close call and a kidnapping that changes everything. Now let's talk about the sequence that turns Monday's episode from mystery into full-on nightmare fuel. Stephanie borrows Kayla's office, and that detail sounds so small, so routine, that it's easy to overlook. But from a storytelling standpoint, it's brilliant, because it creates the illusion of safety. Kayla's office isn't just any room in the hospital. It's a space that represents authority, protection, and trust. It's where decisions get made. It's where people go when things are serious. If Stephanie is in that office, the subconscious message is, she's safe. And that's exactly why it becomes the perfect hunting ground. Because the stalker isn't relying on brute force. They're relying on something much scarier: access. This is a person who understands systems, hospital routines, staff movement, the way people stop asking questions when they see a lab coat, a badge, a delivery container, and that confident, "I belong here" posture. So when the stalker shows up posing as hospital staff and delivers a test tube package, it isn't just creepy. It's calculated. The phrase, "test tube delivery," should set off alarm bells immediately, because it's the kind of item that feels official. Normal, legitimate, the kind of delivery that people don't double-check. And that's the point. The stalker isn't forcing their way into Stephanie's space. They're being invited into it by the hospital's own trust culture. That is psychological warfare at its cleanest. Because once someone can stroll into the hospital as one of them, you're no longer dealing with a random threat outside the building. You're dealing with an enemy who can operate inside the safest place in town. And that changes everything. Then we hit the most terrifying beat. The stalker prepares to come up behind Stephanie and chloroform her. This isn't a warning note. This isn't, "I'm watching you." This is, "I'm taking you." And it tells us something huge about the stalker's mindset. They want Stephanie quiet. Controlled. Removed without a scene. Chloroform as a choice signals planning and patience. They don't want chaos. They want possession. They want time. They want to move her from point A to point B without witnesses and without resistance. So the key question becomes, is Stephanie the ultimate target, or the leverage? Because kidnapping isn't always about the person being kidnapped. Sometimes it's about what that person represents to everyone else. Stephanie is connected to Alex, Kayla, Steve, Jada, and now, because of the elopement, she's emotionally tied into the Kuriaki's family even deeper. So by going after Stephanie, the stalker is potentially sending a message to multiple people at once. I can reach you anywhere. I can override your protection. I can take what you love. And that's why this is not just scary, it's strategic. Now, spoilers say Stephanie fights back and smashes some test tubes in the struggle, which is a huge character beat. It means she doesn't freeze. She resists. She turns whatever is in reach into a weapon, and that's important, because it creates a messy, violent imprint of the attack. Broken glass, spilled contents, evidence that something went wrong in that room. And from a plot perspective, That mess is more than a visual. It's a timer. Because the moment someone finds that shattered test tube scene, the episode stops being, "Is Stephanie in danger?" and becomes, "Where is Stephanie right now?" And the person most likely to find it? Kayla, which leads directly into the other major horror of the day. If Stephanie's story is a thriller, Kayla's story leans into something colder, almost sci-fi horror by day's standards. Kayla Johnson discovers something disturbing, and it involves a corpse. And the reason this hits so hard is because Kayla is not easily shaken. She's a doctor, a hospital leader, a woman who has seen tragedy up close for decades in Salem. She has delivered bad news. She has worked emergency cases. She has faced death in clinical, professional, steady ways. So if Kayla is disturbed, truly disturbed, it means whatever she sees isn't normal death. It means something about the scene is off, unnatural, wrong. And in Salem, a corpse almost always means one of three things: a cover-up, someone is hiding a crime; a fake-out, a body that isn't who people think it is; a resurrection setup, the back from the dead machine is warming up. That's why the mention of Versavix is such a red flag. The minute you tie this corpse to a lab angle, it stops being a standard crime story and becomes something more twisted. Is this body being used for experimentation? Is it part of a staged identity switch? Is someone trying to manipulate DNA evidence? Is there a larger operation happening inside or near the hospital? Because Versavix implies more than a murderer. It implies a system, a process, a method, and Kayla is the worst person for the villains to have in the room, because she'll notice details other people miss. Inconsistencies in how a body is handled, missing documentation, anything that looks medically staged. Which makes her discovery feel like the start of a bigger unraveling, the kind that could expose something massive. Now add the timing. If Kayla discovers a corpse and then later finds her office in chaos, smashed test tubes, mess everywhere, her brain is going to connect those dots fast. Not necessarily logically at first. Emotionally. Because Kayla isn't just reacting as a doctor. She's reacting as a mother. And a mother doesn't need a full report to know when something is wrong. If Kayla walks into her office and sees evidence of a struggle, the alarm won't be gradual. It will be instant. And that's where Monday's episode can become brutal. Kayla may be forced to pivot from professional crisis to personal terror in seconds. One moment she's dealing with a corpse, a hospital-level emergency. The next moment she's dealing with the possibility that her daughter has been taken. And if both of these events are connected to the same shadowy force, then Kayla is not just witnessing a horror story. She's standing at the center of it. So the suspense question that carries us into the next episodes is: can Kayla mobilize help fast enough? And will Steve and Jada recognize that this kidnapping is part of the same pattern they've been chasing? Because if they treat it as a separate event, they'll waste time. But if they connect the corpse, the lab implications, and the hospital infiltration, they might finally realize they're not hunting a stalker anymore. They're hunting a network, and that's when this story gets truly dangerous. Now let's pivot to the DiMera side of Monday's episode, because Salem doesn't only do danger with masks and chloroform. Sometimes the most lethal weapon is paperwork. Johnny DiMera brings Bonnie Kuriaki's what sounds like a genuinely heartwarming update. Her book is moving forward. It's getting published. It's officially being pushed through DiMera Enterprises. And for Bonnie, that's not just good news. That's validation. Bonnie has spent so much of her life being underestimated, dismissed, or treated like comic relief. So the idea that her work is being taken seriously, by a major company, no less, would feel like a victory she's earned. And Johnny, at least on the surface, seems to be doing it for the right reasons. He wants to help. He wants to be supportive. He wants to prove he can use his DiMera influence for something positive instead of destructive. But here's the problem with Johnny's instincts. Johnny is emotional first, and strategic second. And that makes him an easy mark for people like Xander Kyriakis and Kate Roberts Brady, two people who treat business like war. Because Xander and Kate don't hear, Bonnie's book is getting published, and think, how nice. They think, who signed off on that? Who authorized the resources? Who benefits? Who can be blamed if this goes sideways? And that's the heart of this trap. It's not about Bonnie's book. It's about control and liability. Let's talk about what the trap could actually look like, because in corporate storylines, the devil is always in the details. The authority trap. If Johnny pushed this deal forward using DiMera resources, there's a simple question Xander and Kate can weaponize. Did Johnny have the authority to do that? Even if Johnny believes he did, even if he was trying to be helpful, a single missing approval, a missing signature, or the wrong department routing could turn his good deed into corporate misconduct. And in a company like DiMera, people don't need you to be guilty. They just need you to be exposed. The contract trap. Publishing deals aren't simple. They involve rights ownership, distribution terms, profit splits, marketing budgets, brand association, potential conflicts of interest. If Johnny signed something without proper review, Kate and Xander could easily argue he committed the company to obligations it never approved, which opens the door to lawsuits, internal investigations, and power plays. The conflict of interest trap. Bonnie isn't just an author. She's family adjacent, Kyriakis adjacent, connected, and that matters. If Johnny used DiMera influence to benefit someone tied to rival power structures, then Kate and Xander can frame it as favoritism or manipulation, especially if they're trying to paint Johnny as reckless. The scapegoat trap, and this is the part that feels most days. Johnny thinks he's making a bold, positive move that proves he's a better DiMera. Xander and Kate may be setting him up to become the fall guy for something bigger. Because the easiest way to take someone down in a corporation isn't to fight them directly. It's to let them sign the wrong thing, then reveal it at the perfect time, when it causes maximum damage. So the tension here is deliciously cruel. Johnny is walking into this like a hero. But Kate and Xander are watching him like prey. And the saddest twist? Bonnie might be the person who suffers the most. Because if this turns into a legal or corporate battle, her book deal could be stalled, cancelled, or dragged through the mud. Not because her writing isn't good enough, but because Salem doesn't allow clean wins. Which sets up the emotional consequence. Johnny may end the episode realizing that his attempt to do something kind has put Bonnie in danger, and has put himself on the wrong side of a corporate war. And once Johnny feels cornered, he tends to react impulsively. That could make everything worse. So when you zoom out, Monday's episode isn't just a few separate storylines. It's a coordinated pressure cooker. Because Salem is hitting three different kinds of fear at once. First, emotional vulnerability. Alex and Stephanie's elopement. The kind of happy moment that can turn into a trigger for obsession. Second, physical terror. A hospital infiltration and a kidnapping attempt that proves nowhere is safe, not even under Kayla's roof. Third, institutional danger. Corporate warfare where the weapon isn't a gun, it's a signature. And the reason this episode feels so intense is because all three threats share the same theme: control. The stalker wants control over Stephanie's body and freedom. The lab, corpse angle hints at control over identity, even life and death. Xander and Kate want control over DiMera power, assets, and public narrative. So the cliffhanger question going into the next episode isn't just, what happens next? It's this. Are these crises connected, or is Salem collapsing on multiple fronts at the same time? Because if the corpse and Versavic's angle links to the hospital attack, And if the corporate trap is part of a larger scheme, then we're not watching random chaos. We're watching a plan unfold. And in Days of Our Lives, chaos hurts, but strategy destroys. So the real danger is this: by the time Salem realizes these storylines are connected, it may already be too late to stop what's coming.